Okay, good evening. I will.
Sure. Councilmember Isto?
Here.
Councilmember Ennie?
Here.
Councilmember Badami?
Here.
Vice Mayor Moore?
Here.
Mayor Hudes?
Here. So the first thing here is verbal communications. And so if we have anyone who would like to speak about this item, either in person or online, we can take their questions now, their comments. No. Okay, we have none, so we'll close verbal communications and we'll move to the item at hand. And so I'd like to ask the town clerk to explain the process for the interviews tonight.
Good evening, council members. The interview binders contain the interview questions as approved by Council Policy 2-11. The standard questions are limited in number to allow applicants sufficient time to respond. You can decide not to ask all the questions provided, change the order in which they were provided, or ask any appropriate questions. The mayor will determine the order council members will ask questions for each applicant. The applicant will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question. Once the interviews are completed, I will announce the board, commissions, and committees along with the number of vacancies and the number of applicants who applied to the positions and distribute the ballots. Once the voting process for all the boards and committees have been completed, I will announce the results. In order for a candidate to be appointed, a majority of 3 or more votes must occur. In the event of a tie vote, a runoff will be held. And now I'll turn it back over to the mayor to proceed with the interviews.
Okay, thank you. How many planning commissioner applicants do we have tonight?
We have 3 applicants, 2 are in person, and 1 is online via Zoom.
I see. Okay, so I'll invite both applicants to come forward, and we will start questions. Yeah, please have a seat. And we will start questions with Councilmember Rennie.
Okay, well, I'd like to start off. So the Planning Commission is the most work of all of our commissions, and there's a lot of homework and prep work for this. So it's sort of a 2-part question. How much do you already know about our general plan? Have you read it? Have you read our hillside guidelines? Have you read our other ordinances? And are you really ready to commit to do the work it takes to be ready for all of these meetings?
And before you jump in, if you could just introduce yourselves, that would be great. And on Zoom, we have
Russ Lachine.
great. Thank you very much for participating. Let's start with Mr. Ray.
Yeah, I'm familiar with some of the town codes and the general plan, not specifically in detail, but I have been exposed to it for the past 10 or 15 years. Regarding the time, I'm well aware of the time that it takes. I have been paying attention to the Planning Commission and the Town Council stuff for many years. I've been in town for 30 years, and so I didn't jump at this lightly, fully aware that there's a significant commitment, and I hope that my background and my experience will make it an easier transition for somebody like me. But yeah, very well aware that it's not 2 hours a month. It's more than that.
Thank you.
Okay, you can go ahead and use that spot. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Similar to what Chris said, I, in my professional life, work as a CEQA consultant and environmental planner, so I'm very familiar with the Planning Commission role in general in various jurisdictions, and so understand that is a heavy lift role. It's not an easy job. I'm very familiar with general plans and zoning codes and town codes. I've perused through the town's general plan and housing element in the recent past. Have not read them cover to cover at this point, but very familiar with what's in them, the elements that are involved, and the policies and where to find things, and understand the nature of the development process. So yes, understand it's a major commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here.
And Ms. Lachine?
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my opinion here. It's my first experience to be part of such a commission, and I read through the general commission codes, understanding of the zoning in the area. I made myself familiar about it and joined also to a couple of sessions that have taken place to understand how it's run and operated. I'm so committed to this role. I know it takes more than the 2 hours. In my experience, currently in my role as a lead for risk management, anything that has to do with planning will need to be revisited, researched, sized, will be out on the ground. And so I have full commitment to it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to the Vice Mayor. Go ahead, and again, let's start over here.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you all for applying and your interest. This is one of the most important commissions for the town of Los Gatos, and I think has become increasingly important in the new development environment where the town has to put it kindly, less land use control than we are used to, right? And so I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about your view of the town's roles and obligations when it comes to these new sorts of planning applications like SB 330, Builder's Remedy, the Planning Commission's obligation, and how you would evaluate the risk associated with approving or denying an application.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor. I think that's a very good and difficult question. The state has certainly taken over a lot of control and is pushing very hard and taking a lot of decision authority away from towns and local cities and jurisdictions. And so I think that is a real challenge. Almost every hearing that I'm attending in my professional life goes very similarly, where the neighborhood thinks something is out of scale, but the town's hands may be tied because this meets all the state requirements. And so my tactic is, I think the role of the Planning Commission in that case is to articulate those nuances for the public's benefit, to understand where the town has some discretion and where we really may not. So I think that's one of the things that I think is a crucial role into understanding the nuances of how the interplay between the state and the town these days, I think is a real challenge. I'm answering your question.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's go to Ms. Lusheen.
Thank you so much. So from my perspective, I also understand the challenge that has been raised in the area. And my approach that I always think about is, how do I enable the request that's coming to the commission in terms of making it happen for the requester, but also through a safe and secure experience. And so it will be requiring a lot of thinking, a lot of understanding to the construct of how we're operating in the area. But I see that this is an opportunity to be able to even go further and continue support the request that's coming into the commission.
Thank you.
I guess I'm up. I think that one of the reasons I'm here today, I applied for the Planning Commission job probably before COVID, and since then a lot of things have changed around here, obviously. My perspective is, if you don't already know, I come from a real estate background, and my sense is that initially the council or the Planning Commission might be concerned that because I'm a realtor that I am maybe pro-growth or pro-development. And my perspective has changed over the last 25 years, and one of the reasons I sit here today is, if I have boots on the ground as a realtor, I have friends that have developed properties, I have clients that have bought homes, I have lived next door to construction myself. I feel like I am have the pulse of the community in front of me because of the job I do. As I wind down my real estate career and have 4 of my children graduate from college and have much more time than I used to, I sense the frustration that the town has. It feels like they are handcuffed by a lot of the state and federal laws that are coming down, and I don't know if unfair is the right word, it's the reality of what's happening. And I think the reason that I'm here today and that I would like to get on the Planning Commission is because of my perspective, and because I know so many people in town and have sold a bunch of properties and helped developers on the good and the bad. I'd like to protect our town from this, extreme demand for growth at all costs. And whether we approve an addition to a single-family home next door to my house, or we're trying to negotiate and approve or not approve an 8-story building in downtown Los Gatos, I feel very strongly that as a role as a planning commissioner, that we should do everything we can in our power or in your power to protect the flavor of the town, because it could get out of hand. I know that there are limits to what the Planning Commission and the Town Council can do, but serving on the Planning Commission would be able to help me help our town protect what we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councilmember Risto for your question, and if you could, I think it is Mr. Ray's turn to start.
Okay, so I'll start with Mr. Ray. I appreciate all three of you wanting to put your time in as a volunteer for this community. It's one of the most time-consuming commissions, and we also are facing a crossroads where we have to make sure that we're a welcoming community for the future, but how do we create the housing that we're obliged to do in a way that fits? I think you already touched on the answer, but the question I had, so I'll ask it anyway in case you want to go into it more, is when I look at our Planning Commission, what makes it strong is we have a variety of members with different backgrounds. We have attorneys on there, we have somebody who works in development who can read blueprints. And so I guess to each of you, what I ask is, what can you bring from your personal life? And I know you touched on that somewhat, but what strengths, and then how would you then mesh with the other planning commissioners to enrich your view of what the job is? The other thing I wanted to touch on is make sure that as a planning commissioner, there's no ex parte communication allowed. And so once you're on the planning commission, you can't talk about any project that's going to come before you with any members of the community or the developer or anyone, which is why I never went on the planning commission. But if you can expand on what you could do to strengthen, what attributes you have that you would add to our planning commission as it sits right now.
That short question, I think I'll give my best 2 minutes for sure. Like I said before, I don't know if I provide a unique perspective to be on the Planning Commission, but I certainly have my perspective as a longtime realtor in town, a longtime member of the town, and involved in lots of other community things. I hear what my friends and clients and family are saying, so I'm not remote. I am available, and I see the demand every day in my job for housing in this town. People are clamoring to be here at all costs and at skyrocketing costs. And so I think 15 years ago I would have said, managed growth seems like the right thing to do, and we should, respect the demand of the community and the outside forces. But as I said here today, it feels like we're, not being attacked, but there is tremendous pressure from the Planning Commission and the Town Council to approve these projects. And so as a neighbor, as a Little League coach, as a, former Rotary member, and just having been in town for 29 years, I think I have a good flavor of what's happening in this town and what people want. And so that would be my perspective, is, to help the Planning Commission and the town make the right decisions going forward under the constraints that they already have, which are clearly tremendous at the moment.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember. I think for me, having my career being background in CEQA and environmental planning, I have had the fortune of working for one of the longest running firms in the South Bay. I've lived in the South Bay area most of my life since '79. And then I've been in town for over 17 years now. So I have a perspective of development activity, the pressures, the rewards that go on around here. But really what my unique perspective is, I think, is that in my current role, I run my own business now. I do CEQA planning work for local agencies, town planning departments, local wastewater agencies, things like that. But I also sometimes sit on the applicant side of the table and maybe advising them, or processing an application. This is all outside of Los Gatos, of course. Process an application where a property owner doesn't know how to get through that process. So my perspective and my background, I think, gives me the ability to have a well-rounded view of what the applicant wants, what the town needs and needs to do, and then what the regulatory permitting kind of folks need in order to issue their permit. So I think that gives me kind of the whole picture and helps me reach kind of compromise solutions. And if you're familiar with SQL, we do that a lot, where we find problems and then we maybe help the applicant in the town or the city work around those. So I could see being valuable here in that regard, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lachine?
Yeah. So I just want to give you a bit of a background. I moved into the US back in 2018 with my family for my job that was transferring from Europe. And I lived in Europe for 25 years, and I have been working in council committees in Europe prior to moving to the US. When I decided to move to Los Gatos, I really moved because of how the town is, how beautiful, how the commitment is from how it looks and what it delivers on a day-to-day basis. But also, I was so appreciative, and until that day, that it was a welcoming community. It is a welcoming community, and continue to be doing so. And so, when I applied for this role, I had two things in mind. One is, how can we continue to make it that welcoming community, enabling the support of the request that's coming into the commission, but also make sure that it's done in the best way that would work and enable the safety and the security of the ask that's coming towards us. I do have a background in risk management for years, and regulations and compliance, I live it every day. And so there's always a way to make things happen, to make it right, but it also makes both parties, as a commission, as a community, and as an ask for the request that's coming through us, possible to make it happen. And that would be what I would be committed to, that role as I go forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Badami, and if you could start, let's see, I guess we're Mr. Oh, Lachine, right.
Lachine. Hello, thank you, the three of you, for applying. So achieving certification of our housing element was a long process. Did you follow the process, and can you provide comments on the end result?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question really well. Do you mind asking this again?
All right, we recently obtained certification a few months ago of our housing element. It was a long process to get there. Did you follow the process? Because it's extremely important to the town of Los Gatos. Did you follow it? And can you comment on the end result of what the final product is?
I unfortunately didn't follow it, so I cannot be able to comment on it. Yeah, I need to take this and go through it after, but I haven't followed that part. I will need to learn more about it.
Okay, thank you. Chris, are you next?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I knew there would be tough questions tonight. That seems like a pretty tough one. I followed it casually. I cannot speak specifically to all the details of the housing element. Being in this town, hearing from clients, coworkers, friends about it, I know that it's been a long and arduous process for the town council for sure. The end result, I think the writing is on the wall. It's to be determined. I think that it's thorough, and it's cumbersome, and it's complicated. And although I can't specifically speak to all of the details, like she said, I would be willing to research that. But it feels like the town has worked tremendously hard to protect our community, to keep it the way that the town wants it. And so I assume it will be successful. I think that it's to be determined at this point. I hope that it is.
Thank you. Next up, John.
Yes, thank you. I followed it casually with the communications in town, not religiously followed every step of the way, but have been following housing elements for various jurisdictions, including for a couple of clients these last few years in this cycle, and extremely familiar with the state's housing laws that are coming almost daily out of the state capitol and pushing for higher RENA numbers than is realistic in many locations. And so I'm sensitive to the squeeze that cities and towns are feeling about being told they have to fit in a giant number of residents that the existing character of the town may not want. and I'm also sympathetic to the needs for housing in general and the state's ideal to push for that. And so following that stuff generally all the time, but like I said, casually followed the town's update, and I think the town has threaded the needle about as good as possible, in my opinion, from what I know. So I would leave it at that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with Mr. Ray. So if you could talk a little bit about your professional experience and how that might be analogous to being a planning commissioner. Was there anything in your professional experience that is similar to what you understand the role of a planning commissioner to be?
Sure, that's fair. And as I sit here next to John, who has clearly tremendous experience, and I'm like, oh, great. I think that whichever way that the town council goes, my perspective and experience is slightly different than John's, and so they'll make the decision based on what's more important to the town. But as a realtor, I have remodeled and developed and sold some homes, nothing in Los Gatos, but in the greater San Jose area, and have sold 700 or 800 homes in my career, 200 or 300 of them here in Los Gatos. I feel like I understand the needs of the community, clearly the needs of what the buyers and the sellers in our town want. Now those buyers and sellers are also, Little League coaches with me and friends and, people that work at restaurants in town. And so I feel like I'm on the streets every day in town. And so although I don't agree with what everybody has to say, I clearly understand the vibe, if you will, what's going on in town right now. And as I wind down my professional career, I have much more time to devote to volunteer stuff like this. My children are basically adults now and out of the house. I survived that. And so I have the time and clearly the interest to do that. I have a background, my degree is in construction management from Cal Poly. If you saw, I've been selling in Los Gatos and in the Bay Area this is my 29th year. I'm part owner of a real estate company. And so if that's what the town is looking for, that's my expertise, is the community, the people, and what they're looking for, right? I had a client that wanted to buy a piece of land, and next door was a 2-story house, and just like the example in the application, it was very similar. And, representing a buyer, also I know the neighbor next door too, who was going to potentially be opposed to having this person buy it and put a 2-story, the maximum house you can put on a lot, and that's not always appropriate. So I'd be perfectly willing to tell my client that I don't think this is the right thing for you for all of those reasons that I just discussed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schwartz, clearly you have a lot of domain expertise, but what I'm really getting at is the role of the planning commissioner. Have you done something similar to being a planning commissioner?
Sure, thank you. And I think all of us have a wealth of experience that's applicable here. So I think however you go is going to work out great for the town. I appreciate that very much. I think, yes, in terms of my world, I'm often dealing with, CEQA is about disclosure, but I'm often dealing with sensitive confidential information at the outset. Comfortable with that. One of the unique roles about the CEQA planner is you need to be the objective third party. We don't get to have a say in whether I like that project or dislike that project. My job is to evaluate it in an objective fashion in accordance with the law and the requirements. So I see that being very applicable to the Planning Commission role, to take the information, digest the plans, all the technical details, very familiar with all the traffic studies and any of those reports. I'm often commissioning those kinds of studies in my daily work. And so digesting that, conveying to the public why you're making a decision you are or not supporting a motion, for example, I think that's all very normal to me in my professional life, if that helps. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Lachine, again, is there something in your professional background that is analogous to what you understand the planning commissioner does?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my current experience and career, as I mentioned, I lead risk management globally, and part of that role is about understanding the privacy of the information that is applicable to the businesses that I work with, and how to make sure that it's disclosed appropriately when it should be and when it shouldn't be. So the secrecy of the information, the disclosure of the the projects that are going, it's no issue compared to what I do on a day-to-day basis. The other thing is being able to understand the regulations and make sure that the regulatory bodies, which the Planning Commission has to also abide with and understand, is something that is very similar to what I do on a day-to-day basis. So in the experience that I have gone through with the global view, it gives me quite a lot of opportunities to understand how better to service that role with the Los Gatos relationships, with the global understanding, with the planning that I have to do in my current role as it is, and also being able to deliver a convincing and real experience that would make the voting for a decision very simple, because I have done all of the research, all the work, and all of the detailed pros and cons that would help the committee to make the right decisions for the future. That's how I see my role, is very close to this commission, and that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. So that concludes our discussion about Planning Commissioner, and thank you. We will take interviews next for the next group, and we will let you know shortly after that concludes. So if I could thank you very much and ask Mr. Cleveland and Mr. Jensen to come forward.
They're not for the same.
Oh, I'm sorry, they're not for the same, okay.
We have one for one and one
Sorry.
for the other.
Okay, Mr. Jensen. No, I
apply for all of them.
apologize. So, yeah, so General Plan Committee, and again, we will ask questions. This time I'll ask the Vice Mayor to start if he has questions for you.
Thank you for your interest and your continued service to the town. I wanted to just ask how you view the role of the General Plan Committee generally.
I only been attending one general plan meeting so far. It's obviously something that has a very broad spectrum of items that needs to be addressed and planned, and it's now I lost my thread. So it's a very wide spectrum and covers everything from fire hazards to housing and so forth. As part of that, of course, I have read the general plan, the new general plan, and I'm about 150 pages into the housing element.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jensen. I know you've served on other commissions. I've seen you at the general plan meeting. We've got a little feedback, but that's okay. So I guess what I'm curious about, a couple things. One is this commission may be very busy this year, depending on implementation of the housing element. It has sometimes gone with only meeting once a year. So it's pretty much, kind of on demand if there's something that needs to be done. So what in particular attracted you to this commission versus you were on arts or community health and senior services?
I was on arts and culture, yes.
Okay. So, the difference is, that commission met regularly, had a work plan every month. This will be more of, similar to planning commission, when there's a need that, the thing is brought before you. So what is interesting about that to you, and, how do you view that?
I think the tasks that will be at hand are definitely not only challenging, but to me they would be extremely a lot more interesting than the arts aspects of, from the Arts and Culture Commission. So that is one of the things that attracts me a lot more, because the subjects that we have to handle there are, to me, will be a lot more interesting, and obviously a lot more extremely important. I don't consider arts and culture terribly important to the town. Obviously, planning is.
The other arts and culture commissioners may disagree, but that's probably why this is a better option for you.
Yes, I know. I know.
Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. So I notice here that you say that the land use element rescinded remains one of the most critical and challenging aspects of you being interested on the general plan. So do you have any comments on the original 2040 general plan element compared to the one that is now in place due to it being rescinded?
The new general plan. You want to comment? Comes on the new general plan?
Just a comparison between the two land use elements. They were kind of drastic. So you said you're most interested in that, in the land use element, as being the most.
Oh, yeah. The land use and housing element obviously are extremely important because that's all what the planning commission is dealing with, obviously. So obviously the land use is an important piece of that. So not sure if that answers your question.
I was just curious if you were aware of the differences between the two, if you followed them, as that seems to be what you're most interested in.
I'm not exactly sure if comparing what.
It's okay. You gave me enough information because we have the rescinded one that's in place right now, and I take it that that's going to be the one you're going to be most familiar with.
Yeah. I know the housing element was, and also there's one more that was rescinded from the general plan.
Community design.
Yes. I know those two were, but that's why I'm reading the new housing element.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rennie.
So my questions have actually kind of been covered. I'll just give you an opportunity if you want to elaborate on anything in your, or re-emphasize anything in your application.
If I should comment on the new general plan, I think the one thing that stands out to me is that, yes, I did this an emphasis on having more people bicycling and walking, and I don't disagree with that, but I think you cannot just make that an alternative to driving, because you cannot expect people to walk or bicycle necessarily 10 miles. Bicycling, yes, I don't mind that, but you cannot expect them to walk 10 miles. So there needs to be some public transportation or some other form of transportation to take you the last piece of the way. So I think that's missing in the general plan. It's just mentioned very slightly, and then there's also the light rail, which is just mentioned with one paragraph or so, and I would like to see that coming all the way to downtown. But I mean, unless you have more public transportation, I don't think you can expect people to be walking that far. And the same goes with limiting the amount of parking. If you limit it to a single car, then that's going to be little. I think that's going to be hard on the residents living there. So that, I think those are going to be big challenges. I understand why, because of the limited space and limited housing. So I do understand that, but you're missing the piece of the public transportation, I believe.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Vice Mayor. Oh, okay. Sorry. So my last person to ask a question is, what's your philosophy on land use, and how does that relate to the character of the town?
It's a hard question. If we to keep a small town, keep the small town. I'm sorry, English is not my first language. I'm just trying to use it. It's the challenge there is that a big part of the town residents are opposed to any expansion, more residents, smaller lots, and higher density. So I think the only way around that would be to find areas where you can increase the density. And I think the only way you can do that is by having high-rises or multi-story buildings. And I'm thinking of Oka Road. I watched every council meeting, so I went on Oka Road, and I can understand the residents that they're concerned there. I don't necessarily believe there's a fire hazard issue there, but there's only a single road, so something needs to be done if there's going to be a lot more residents or development there. Maybe widening the roads or finding another way to have another road coming in there. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
So again, we will make some decisions later after the next. So, Mr. Cleveland, apologize for calling you up early, but we're happy to have you here. And I think with this one, we'll start with Councilmember Risto with any questions for you.
Okay, thank you. I didn't really have a lot of questions. I mean, basically, Personnel Board deals with personnel, and you have a human resources background. I guess I would ask, are you aware of any of the Personnel Board meetings? Have you watched any or seen any?
I haven't watched them. I did read some of the minutes for the prior year's Personnel Board meetings. It seems like I think the original intent was the Personnel Board was to hear grievances, appeals for grievances, disciplinary actions, and it's expanded a little bit to include other HR-related matters. I saw a presentation on benefits, for example. So I think it's good. I mean, tap into the resources, get other people to look and give feedback. And so, yeah, just in terms of looking at some of the minutes, but other than that, no.
Basically, you enjoy what you do at work and you're happy to volunteer and do more of it, right?
Well, it's a way of one, giving back to a community that I've enjoyed for many, many years. And what better way than providing a resource to the city in terms of my experience and background, and hopefully I can help.
Councilmember Badami.
There we go. All right, thank you for your application. The Personnel Board, obviously, the 45 years as a human resources. I'm just curious about your engagement with the town in other ways. Do you follow council meetings, planning commission meetings, follow builder's remedy applications, other things that are happening within our town?
Remotely, at a distance, I read about them and get involved with them. Rob came up to our house and campaigned. But I've volunteered for, like it's the local soccer, Las Gatos United Soccer League and Little League coaching, been involved in a lot of those aspects. But when I was looking to find another way to participate, this seemed like a good fit.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rainey?
I don't have any special questions. Is there anything else you want to elaborate on your application?
No, I don't think so. To kind of add to some of the things I've been doing since I left the corporate world, I've been volunteering and participating in various activities that leverage my human resources background. So like, for example, one of the things I do, I'm an advisor for Skydeck, which is UC Berkeley's startup incubator. And it was a way for me, one, to give back to my alma mater in addition to funds, but give back in terms of time and experience to startups that just really need help in all aspects of their business, including the human resources aspect. So that's kind of been what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, and this kind of fits right into that whole mode of operating.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I also don't think I have any other questions. I appreciate that you have retired from the HR world and want to continue contributing to the community. So thank you for your interest.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we don't need to torture people when there's only one applicant for a role, but I would just ask you, will you be disappointed if this commission doesn't meet very often? Because there aren't always matters every month or every week for this commission.
Well, that's good news for the city. You hope this personnel board doesn't meet very often. It means other things are going right outside of the personnel board. So that's a positive, and that you should feel good about that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And like I said, we are going to move to deliberations and appointments following this. So I want to thank everyone who's attended. It's remarkable the talent that we have in town and the willingness of people to put in their volunteer time. So we're not taking questions right now. Sorry, happy to chat with you afterwards, but yeah. Okay, so we now close the public portion of the meeting and we move to a review and deliberations and then a decision.
This will now be distributing the ballots. 3 applicants were interviewed for 1 short-term vacancy on the Planning Commission. Council may appoint only 1 applicant. 1 applicant was interviewed for 3 vacancies on the General Plan Committee. And 1 applicant was interviewed for 2 short-term vacancies on the Personnel Board. We'll now ask you to complete the ballots, and when you're done, we will collect them and read the results.
Okay, thank you. So we will be taking a brief pause while the results are compiled, and then we'll reopen. So thank you.
Okay, we're ready for the results.
Okay, go ahead, Town Clerk.
And I will read the votes. There was 1 vote for Chris Ray from Councilmember Hudis, and there were 4 votes for John Schwartz from Vice Mayor Moore, Councilmember Badami, Councilmember Rennie, and Councilmember Risto. So John Schwartz, by a majority vote, is appointed to the Planning Commission. The General Plan Committee, Brent Jensen received a unanimous 5 votes. and the Personnel Board, John Cleveland received a unanimous 5 votes. So Brent Jensen is appointed to the General Plan Committee, and John Cleveland is appointed to the Personnel Board. And the clerk's office will notify all candidates of the results.
Okay, thank you all very much for attending. This meeting is adjourned.